The Cuyahoga County Finance and Budgeting Committee meeting for Monday, March the 4th, 2024. Will please come to order, and I would ask Janine if you would please call the roll.
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Miller,
Here.
Ms. Turner,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Sprine,
Here.
Mr. Kelly,
Here.
Mr. Byrne.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Thank you very much. And item number 3 is public comment. Has anybody signed in?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
And we have on the agenda the approval of the minutes from the February 26, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion
So
regarding
moved.
those minutes? It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from February 26th. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say no. Ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. Number 5, matters referred to committee are none. And item number 6 is the presentation from Director Parfiowitz on the 2023 Cuyahoga County results of operations, which shows our actual performance numbers for the entire year. Welcome, Director.
Thank you, Councilman Miller.
And I'd like to thank you publicly for getting the report out to all of us a week ahead of the meeting so that we all had plenty of time to review it and prepare our questions for today's meeting. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Again, Walter Parfiowitz, I'm the Budget Director within the Fiscal Office. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2023 results. Before I begin, I just want to be sure everyone has a copy of the actual report, results of operation report, and also the PowerPoint presentation. I did note in the PowerPoint presentation in the lower left-hand corner of each slide as you go through it, it does reference the relevant page number from the report, just if you want to use the report rather than the PowerPoint presentation. So we ended 2023 in a favorable position. Both of our operating funds, general fund and the levy fund, they ended with surpluses. You'll see in the future slides, after we remove the impacts of the ARPA spending and the one-time project spending, the general fund just ended with a very small surplus of only about $55,000. But the Health and Human Services levy fund ended with a significant surplus of approximately $13 million. I also want to report that our workforce has also grown or increased from last year by 312 staff. So with that, I'll just go over a couple of these highlights. So the highlights that I have, since I report on these things just about every quarter, I thought I'd only go over the last several there. So in the last quarter, we approved $3 million for the Veteran Services Headquarters, the 0.25% sales tax for an additional 40 years, the Garfield Heights property purchase for the Central Services Campus. We approved the 2024-25 biennial budget. And we also approved $3 million for the 911 Consolidation Shared Services Fund. So with that, I'm just going to get right into the general fund and go through the slides.
Are there any questions on the highlights? Councilman Gallagher.
Quickly. What property in Garfield Heights? What's a Central Service Campus?
That was a property that was purchased for the jail.
Why isn't it the jail property?
I believe it's labeled on our documentation as the Central Services Campus.
So do you have a definition for that for me?
I don't.
So who told you to put it down like that?
I believe I took it right out of the resolution.
Central Service Campus. Okay.
So, Director, the highlights reflected a reduction of appropriations of $265 million at the end of the year. Can you give us some sense of why excess appropriations are that large and what the major items are that consisted of?
Council Miller, I'd rather go through the presentation so you can see where some of them are. A lot of it is ARPA spending that's still appropriate, it hasn't been spent. And then there's a bunch of special revenue funds that we appropriate for each year, but due to the timing of the projects, things don't get spent as quickly as we appropriate.
So you can point out some of them as we
Sure,
go along.
sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilman Sean.
Yeah, you alluded to that our head count is up 300?
Yes, 312.
312 people. And can you tell this body where the majority of those 312 people are?
Primarily, it's within the Department of Health and Human Services and also the Sheriff's Office. I have a slide that details all
Okay,
this in
thank
the
you.
future. Yeah.
Any other questions at this time? Okay, please proceed.
Okay, so the general fund. General fund ended with an operating deficit overall of 69.3, but this, of course, includes the ARPA spending and also some one-time project spending. You'll see the first column there shows the 69.3, and then there's two additional columns, one labeled ARPA, the second one labeled one-time projects. Backing those items out, we end up with about a $55,000 surplus, small surplus. So this slide details the general fund revenue by category. So the general fund again ended with $587 million in revenue, 49.1 or 9% more than budget. And I've highlighted the areas that had the larger variances, and they include interest earnings, intergovernmental revenue, other revenue, and sales taxes. So just quickly, interest earnings ended at 25.8 million, 16.7 over the budget. It's all due to interest rates. In the report, I do show a chart that details interest rates going back to 2002 all the way through to 2023. Early on in 2022, interest rates were just 0.1%. And by the end of 2023, we're all the way up to 5.5 or 5.6%.
So, Director, on that point, as I recall, for 2024, the interest earnings are projected at 15 or 16 million. Certainly more than last year's budget, but well under last year's actual. Do you anticipate the interest earnings will drop into that range, or do you think that number is underestimated based on what you now know?
Council Miller, I believe the number is underestimated. I believe we'll probably pick up between $5 and $10 million in interest that's not budgeted.
Okay, well, it's good. There's always things that happen in the other direction, so that provides us a little cushion for 2024.
We'll update when we do the first quarter report. It'll be projected out there.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions on the revenue side?
Sure, on that same point, Mr. Chairman. So you do anticipate that there will be a drop in interest earnings?
I believe so. I don't think we're going to sustain this.
Okay, and so therefore, on the flip side of that, therefore, there should be a reduction in interest expense wherever we have obligations that might come forward between now and the end of this period. Is that?
Yes, I would agree with that.
So if we are factoring in interest expense at this range of the 25.8 that we achieved this year, it's going to be lower than that same proportionality, I would assume.
Yes.
Okay, so I certainly hope that when we're looking at bonding and we're looking at what we're going to go out on this tax that we just approved, that we actually take that into consideration as far as what we need to raise for that 40 years. Because if you are our expert and you're telling us as our expert that the interest expense should be dropping, we should really reflect that in how we price these notes out and not ask the taxpayers to pay more than what they should be obligated to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Intergovernmental revenue. Okay, so we ended at 74.2 million. It's about $11 million or 17.5% over the budget. Here we had two factors driving this. There was primarily all public defender, but two pieces. So last year we did increase the reimbursement rates for the courts, higher assigned counsel rates at the county level, and also the state public defender increased their reimbursement rate at the state level. So the current reimbursement rate that we're receiving now is about 85%. They started out with 90, but what we've budgeted for is 85, just to be conservative. We don't think that they can sustain the 90% level. Other revenue ended at 26.2, 13.3 million over the budget. The surplus includes a couple things in there. There's 3.1 million in transfers from the garage fund, basically paying the general fund back for 2024 and 25's debt payments early. There's $2.6 million of additional bed taxes beyond the budget. 4.3 million, I reported on previously, a reimbursement of excess pledge payments on the Gateway bonds that we've paid off, and $2.3 million in state reimbursements to the Board of Elections. And then our biggest piece, sales tax, ended at $320.2 million, which is $7.7 million or 2.4% over budget. So what I'd like to report is our average sales tax, they do continue to increase, and our collections for the second half of 2023 increased to almost $28 million each month, and hopefully we'll stay at that rate.
So, two questions on the sales tax. First of all, for 2023, I know you budgeted a 2% increase and you came in 2.4% over budget. So am I right that you had somewhere in the range of a 4.4% increase year over year?
Actually, the increase year over year was 3.7.
3.7? Okay. And what number is pegged for this revenue in 2024?
$337 million.
37. So,
Council Miller, we used 4%.
so that's about 4% above the actual. Okay. Pretty aggressive number. We'll see. Okay. But
Hoping to sustain it.
but if inflation is 3%, well, you'd only need 1% above inflation, so that probably should be doable. Okay. Any other questions on the revenue side?
Yes. So for complete clarity, this body is now projecting 4% increase in the sales tax.
Correct.
That 4% would also be affecting directly the increase on the sales tax that we just approved as a body. That same 4% is going to multiply against all sales tax revenue.
Correct.
And what we had forecasted originally at the very beginning, as Mr. Miller will recall, on when we went forward to looking at this financing package, it was zero increase.
Correct.
So the difference between what we are now forecasting and what we originally did is four percentage points, which is probably $10, $11, $12 million at least on top of what we've got.
Councilman Strawn, on the last version, there was a 2% increase built into those numbers.
Yeah, I'm not going to be disingenuous. I was going to get there.
I understand exactly what you're saying. You know, we're saying 4%, but I just don't feel comfortable taking 4% over the next 40 years.
Well, I don't disagree that that's not the right that's not the great assumption, but clearly zero is not the right assumption, and I don't even believe 2% is the right assumption, as we disproved from the time that originally was passed by the county commissioners. We've already proved that they had forecasted $41 million it was going to raise, and raising right now it's going to raise $72 million. So we're off by a considerable amount of money, and it's going to yield, I believe, to this county into the general fund over $1 billion. That is not anticipated, nor did we tell the taxpayers that it was going to raise an extra surplus of $1 billion that's going to go in the general fund. So I think we always need to be honest with the taxpayers, and I don't think have shared all the facts as far as where they're going to go, and I hope we really look at this before we actually do the finalization of what we do for bonding, because this body is going to be asked to vote on those bonds before they go forward. Thank you.
Anything else? So, Director, would I be correct in saying, in assuming that you said that you're comfortable in forecasting a 4% sales tax increase for 2024, but you don't necessarily think that that rate is going to be maintained for a longer stretch of time?
Yeah, I don't believe we could sustain 4% growth over the next 40 years each year.
Okay,
By the way, I hope not. We won't be able to afford bread.
right. Agreed. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Please proceed.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the expenditures portion. So this slide summarizes general fund expenses by budget line. So in the top box, same format that you've seen in the past, top box expenditures ended at $656 million, or $135 million, or 17.1% under budget. The two pieces, personal services, were at $337, other expenses at $253, both under budget. Personnel services by $6.4 million, or 1.9%, and other expenses at $114.8 million, or 31.2%. And then finally, subsidies ended at $66.2 million, which is 14.8, or 18.2% under budget. So Councilman Miller, this is one big piece of the budget reductions, appropriation reductions we did at the end of the year. Basically taking off almost $100 million of ARPA appropriations. The middle box there, it shows ARPA expenditures of 63.4, but the budget was much larger. So the bottom box there, when you back out the ARPA expenditures, we ended at $593.3 million, which is still $37.9 million, or 6% under budget.
So, Director, does this mean that we have $98 million at least in ARPA money that has not yet been spent?
Councilman Miller, that is correct.
But most of that's been programmed, is that also correct?
That's correct. There's $53 million for the Justice Center project, and the remainder is still just needs to be finalized.
Chairman?
Yes.
Now that we've got the expenditures and the revenue being discussed, and for the benefit of three of the members up here on the panel who are not here when we actually passed, you know where I'm going to go, is there any problem with us staying within our reserves that we have put together as far as statutory language for this?
Councilman Strawn, no, there's no problem.
Okay, so our reserves are like any other business or family should be doing. We've got rainy day fund that we've got set aside, and we have no trouble with sustaining that.
Not at all. In the next two slides, you'll see the ending cash balance in the analysis there.
Thank you.
So Director, the ARPA had 98 million left over, and 53 million was the Justice Center fund, so that leaves 45 million other. And my question is of that 45 million, how much of it has a use been identified? It's just not been executed and spent yet, and how much of that is money for which no use has yet been determined?
Councilman Miller, I believe it's all been identified. I don't think there's anything left.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Continue.
So the next slide just details out some of these expenditures by the department so you can see the larger variations. So this slide, so there's $121.2 million general fund expenditure surplus. On page 40 of the actual report is the complete list. This slide only identifies the ones that had the larger increases. So The majority of the surplus, if you look at the chart on page 40, 111 million were in county executive departments, 6.4 is in elected officials, and 3.5 in boards and commissions. And you see the larger ones there under the county executive, so the fiscal office is going to be the ARPA spending. The medical examiner underspent the budget, the sheriff's office underspent their budget. Under elected officials, it was primarily common pleas court, juvenile court, and in the boards and commissions, there were two as Board of Elections, followed by the Veteran Services Commission.
So, I just want to clarify something for all of my colleagues, and the best example of it is the sheriff's office, where they underspent their budget by 2.77 million. But I just want to remind everybody that the final budget number of 176.573 million is substantially greater than the number that we started out with at the beginning of the year, probably by 20 million or so, because as the year went on, we were passing fiscal agenda items. We were providing additional personnel expenses. We were covering overtime, and we were doing these things all year long. And the office came in a little bit under the final number that was authorized, but still their expenses substantially exceeded what was originally budgeted, and that would be true for a lot of the other departments as well. But I just wanted to give that as an example so that we're clear on exactly what we mean and didn't mean when we say that we had a surplus. Is that
That's
Is
correct,
that a fair
Councilman Miller.
statement?
We added quite a bit of money for overtime as well as some other contractual spending.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
did increase their budget a couple times during the year, I believe for jail medical, for the food contracts, when contracts with increases were negotiated beyond what was budgeted.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Councilman Gallagher.
Well, what was the actual start number on the sheriff?
The adopted budget for 2023 was 147.7 million.
Wouldn't it be better to at least have that on here for us?
It's on page 40 of the report.
Because then we added 85 personnel. And how much overtime did we use?
I believe the number was about 17 million.
17. And we budgeted how much for the next 2 years in overtime?
I believe $8 million.
Zero? Initially zero?
No, the base budget included $8 million.
No, how did it get there? Initially, it was zero.
Oh, you mean for 2023?
Moving forward.
Moving forward, we did put $8 million in the base budget. It was there from the beginning.
The beginning number I saw was zero. We raised it at hearings, and then the administration put in 6 or 8, and we put in 2. So that brought us to 8 or 10. I don't recall which one.
Councilman Gallagher, I believe the executive put in 8 and council added 2 for a 10.
After we identified zero.
I don't believe so, Councilman Gallagher. I believe the recommended budget references $8 million in sheriff's overtime.
Okay. It's an interesting argument when you need 20 and you're going to argue to me 8's good. But I'll grant you that.
Same token, we did.
I'll win. I'll let you win on that one.
No,
but
no, I don't want to win.
Still looking for that 12.
We also added staff. We added 40 COs.
At least on them, and I'm not just picking on them, but I pay attention to that because I see a disaster down the road, and I'd like to avoid it.
I would like to avoid it too. I agree.
But it seems that we've been playing this game for years, so.
Yeah, I believe we're covering some of these budget deficits, if you will, with our revenue that we receive beyond budget.
Okay, thank you.
Director, to follow up on the councilman's question, do we have numbers yet for what the overtime was in the sheriff's office for January and February of 2024?
Councilman Miller, we should have them now. I don't have them with me, but I
I
could provide.
I didn't expect you would. It's not a question you could have reasonably anticipated, but would you get those to us?
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Next slide just quickly goes over subsidies. So as you saw on a previous slide, the summary slide, general fund subsidies ended at $66.2 million, around $14-15 million under budget. This slide just details the 5 major items that contributed to the surplus. So the main contributor is the county hotel debt, which we're required to budget in full, but the hotel operating account basically pays for half. 2 additional items were also items that are required to be budgeted, but we didn't make any payments on. There was 2017 sales tax bonds, and then the Flats East Bank guarantee. And then we had 2 items that ended with deficits. They were the transfers to the Challenge Loan Program with Key Bank and the 9/11 Consolidated Shared Services Fund that we did at the end of the year. The Challenge Loan Program was from last year, was appropriated 2023. Paid out until this year. And then the 911 Consolidation Shared Service Fund. Towards the end of the year when we did appropriate this, I didn't make an adjustment on the subsidy side since we were already underspending the subsidy, so I just let that flow out to the end. But details the $14 or $15 million surplus.
So, Director, on the first item,
Yes.
even though we're required to budget for all of it, excuse me, it appears that the hotel covered most of it. Is that correct?
Well, this year, yes, because we did have some residual dollars with our trustee account, so we didn't pay as much as we would have normally.
So, for 2024, how much did we budget for the county hotel debt?
We budget about $20 million. We're required to budget it in full, $10 million from the general fund subsidy, and $10 million really comes from the hotel operating account.
And what's your best estimate on how you think that might actually play out this year?
This year, I believe we'll pay out our $10 million that we're budgeted to pay. So there will still be a $10 million surplus because the hotel will pay for their portion. I shouldn't say it that way. It's our hotel.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councilman Schron.
Yeah, the Challenge Loan Program, just refresh my memory. I thought that's completely shut down, isn't it? Is the Challenge Loan, is that the one that Executive Fitzgerald put in place?
No, this was under Executive Budish last year.
Oh, okay, all right. Because the county executive, Fitzgerald, put one in place at one time too, of an educational college matching fund, but that was pretty short-lived, I thought.
That's not this.
Okay, thank you.
This is a housing program, is that correct?
Councilman Miller, that is correct. Yeah.
The other was also, I thought, phrased as a challenge loan, where you were raising money for college tuition, where you're putting money into a fund, I thought.
So now I'll move into the ending cash balance so you can see the where we ended, what the reserve requirements were. Okay. So again, top box, we started the year with $344 million. As you saw, the revenue at 587 in the general fund, expenditures at 590, subsidies at 66. So we ended with a cash balance of $274.9 million. So we're $137.6 million more than the cash reserve requirement of $137.3 million. So we ended the year in compliance, of course, with our cash reserve requirement. The middle box details the ARPA revenue and expenses included in the top. So then the bottom box, excluding the 2, the general fund ends at about $176.9 million, which is 39.6, almost $40 million more than the cash reserve requirement without ARPA money. questions about the general fund?
Continue.
So now I'll go right into the levy, which the levy had the good news this year. So for 2023, the Health and Human Services levy fund ended with an operating surplus of about $13 million. So operating revenue at 286.7, with operating expenses and subsidies totaling 273.5 million.
Director, am I correct that the expenditures was about what we expected, but the revenue was considerably more than we expected?
Councilman Miller, that is correct. I believe it's all in delinquencies and collections.
And so we don't see that 286 as a sustainable number. We just had a good year. Is that correct?
Councilman Miller, I would agree with you. We just had a good year.
Okay, thank you.
So in the levy, there's just two small pieces of revenue. It's property taxes and intergovernmental revenue. It's the homestead exemption. Intergovernmental ended more or less right on budget, $148,539 under the $16.1 million. Property taxes, on the other hand, ended at 270.7, or almost $8 million, 3% over the budget of 262.8. On the levy side, there's just not much here. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So this slide just summarizes the expenditures. The other expenditures line, that's primarily the cost of the tax collection. So that came in basically on budget. But overall, we were 13.1 million, or 4.6 under budget. And I'll show you the surpluses by department here on the next slide. Now, this slide only details the larger surpluses. If you want the full list, it's on page 43 of the report. So the larger contributors were juvenile court at $2.5 million, HHS admin, $2.5 million, job and family services had a deficit of 4.2. It's primarily due to some projections that they provided about revenue coming in that didn't come in on time. And they also projected higher spending that did not materialize. Child support ended with a $2.4 million surplus. Children's services ended with a $6.3 million surplus. Senior adult services, another small deficit, $1.4 million. Again, projected spending on contracts that didn't materialize at the end of the year. Early childhood ended with a $3 million surplus, and there's late invoices there. The providers with workforce challenges were reported. Family and Children First Council, just about $1 million, $800,000 surplus due to, again, professional services being underspent and contract starting late, contract negotiations, things reported to me. And then homeless services ended with a $1.3 million surplus. Late contracts, several shelters and veteran service providers started late and underspent their contracts. There's some narrative in the report that talks about each one of these departments and the reason for the surplus or the deficit.
Director, I would like to focus on one line on this slide, and that's the one for early childhood,
Yes.
in which it was underspent by $3 million. And at the budget hearings, the director said that the money we're currently budgeting enables us to meet all the capacity that's out there. And the fact that they underspent their budget by $3 million would tend to support that idea. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with you, Councilman. I talk with Director Rohrman all the time about the pre-K program and what's going on. And she continues to report, providers billing late, but a bigger piece of it being workforce challenges, providers not being
they're just, if they could provide more capacity, we might fund it, but at this time, we're covering all the capacity that's out there.
Councilman Miller, I would agree with that. I believe Shauna Rorman did believe her budget was set adequately for 24 and 25.
Okay. Any other comments or questions by my colleagues? Okay, continue.
So this is really the last slide for the levy fund. It just goes over the ending cash balance. So we started the year 26.4. You just look at the actual column, $26.4 million. Revenue, 286.7. Expenditures, subsidies, 273.5. So we ended with a cash balance of $39.6 million. So this ending cash balance is 11.2 million more than the cash reserve requirement of 28.4 million. So again, similar to the general fund, we ended the year in compliance with our code requirements. HHS ended in a good position. It really did.
Questions, comments? Okay.
So just a couple of quick slides, you know, on an all funds basis. So this
Yes,
includes,
sure. We got plenty of time.
Okay,
Much
the,
time as you need.
on that previous slide, them, the reserves being $11 million, the balance being $11 million over above the reserves requested. So we have no trouble hitting that statutory amount, either the percentage that we have in the reserves.
nope.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Actually, more of a question for the chairman. Do you remember a time where we've actually had to use the cash reserve on HHS?
Absolutely. When we,
Earlier on?
when we put the levy prior to this one on the ballot in 2020, and asked for renewal plus an increase. At that point, we had exhausted our entire reserve and we're underwater, and the general fund fronted the levy some money. So it's actually not unusual for us to go through our reserves as we go through a levy cycle, because the revenue is generally fixed. We did better than that this year because of as the director reported, we collected some money that was in arrears, but normally it's pretty fixed while the costs keep rising.
Did
So-
you recall when that was? How long ago that was?
Yes, that levy was on the ballot. It was scheduled for March, but because of COVID, it got put off a month or two into April or May, but that was in 2020 when that last election was.
Thank you.
That time we were underwater on the HHS levy.
Thank you.
Councilman
Am I
Miller,
cor-
if I can add, yeah, that was $15 million. It was transferred from the general fund to the levy.
Right.
Just last year, we were almost $500,000 below our reserve requirement.
Councilman Tron?
Nope.
Okay.
Just please, we have reserves.
Yes. Okay. Please continue.
Okay, so this is all funds. This includes everything that the county has, whether it's general fund levy, special revenue, includes our debt. Every fund possible is in the all funds analysis. So here, I think I went too far. So all funds revenue, 1.8 billion. 53 million or 3.1% over the budget. I'll go into, I think it's a future slide, has a little bit more detail. And expenditures at 1.88 billion or 300.4 million, 13.8%. 14.8% under budget. Let me give you a little detail. So the major contributors to the surplus overall on the revenue side are just our general fund and the levy fund. So we had 49.1 million surplus, as you saw on the general fund side, and a $7.8 million surplus on the Health and Human Services levy side. So just same two items just coming up again is the major variance when we look at all funds altogether. But then when we look at all funds expenditures, 1.88 billion, 300.4 million, 13.8% under budget. So all of these variances are detailed by department on page 45 of the report, but this slide just goes through, the operating funds and also the special revenue funds that make up the surplus. So again, we talked about the general fund surplus of 135.9 million in the operating account. And in the levy fund, we had a $13.1 million surplus in the operating account. All the other surpluses are all in special revenue and for a variety of different reasons. Common pleas, $9.7 million surplus. It's primarily due to a 2-year community corrections grant that carries over into 2024. So the 9.7 is the second half. It was all budgeted in 1 year rather than over 2 years. The fiscal office has $29.8 million surplus. Again, that's where the hotel debt service is budgeted. So $11.9 million in county hotel debt service that we're required to appropriate, but that we don't ever pay out. We had a $3 million surplus in the REA fund, the real estate assessment fund, and $13.3 million budgeted excise taxes that go to Cuyahoga Arts and Culture that go directly to them, but we're still required to budget. Health and Human Services, they contributed $32.2 million to the surplus, and every division of HHS ended with a surplus. Previously we talked about the Health and Human Services subsidies. So subsidies and departmental budgets are two different things. So there were a couple of subsidies that were in deficit situations, but in the end, when you look at the budgets in total, they all ended up with surpluses. 2.1 million of the overall surplus in HHS was in personal services, and 17.2 was in contracts, and 8.3 million in client services. A lot of money there that was underspent. Road capital projects, $25.1 million surplus, and this happens every year. We budget as requested or as we're asked, but we have these surpluses and they're always explained back to me because of the timing of these projects. Public Works Road and Bridge, same thing, $16.2 million surplus. Road and bridge projects typically taking multiple years to complete, and it's timing of projects. Public Works Sanitary, $9.2 million surplus. Again, timing, reimbursements for municipalities, and also contingencies and emergency repairs. And then finally, the Adams Board contributed also to the surplus, $700,000 in personal services, $1.1 million in contracts, and $11.6 million in client services. So these are the dollars, I believe, Councilman Miller, that you were asking about in the way of appropriation or reductions that we wind up processing at the end of each year just to meet our compliance requirements, so that we're not appropriating more than what our expenditure levels are.
Questions or comments by my colleagues? So,
Councilman Miller, let me finish with one more because I want to show you the ending cash balance on an all-fund basis, if I could.
before you move to that, I have a comment on the previous slide. The line that I want to call people's attention to is the one about the Adams Board, because we had a long discussion on this during the finance and budget hearings on the biennial budget about the Adams Board and whether they were in fact using reserves and whether they had adequate reserves and whether it was sustainable and stuff like that. And so we see that their actual expenditure was well under budget. But I do believe that their revenue number was in the low 70s, if I recall correctly.
You recall correctly, Councilman Miller. That's correct.
So what that means is that they decreased their reserves somewhere between 5 and 10 million. So they are spending more than they're taking in, but not by nearly as much as was budgeted. So I just put that out there for everybody's to ponder, because I'm sure that issue's going to come up again when we get to the 2025 update and beyond. Any other questions or comments? Okay, please proceed.
Just a final slide on the all funds, just to show the ending cash balance. So we started the year at 1.151 billion. We brought in revenue of 1.798 billion. Expenditures totaled 1.881 billion, and we ended at $1.068 billion on an all funds basis at Cuyahoga County. So at this point, I'd like to shift over to workforce and go over some of the FT information that I have.
Good.
This is just a quick chart about our historical staffing levels. I try to keep this updated each year, but I think it's the next chart that I think you'll find a little more interesting. As I said earlier, we added 312 FTEs between 2022 and 23. And if you look at the last page of the report, the very last page, it provides the detail on all the departments. But I did put together a slide. This slide details the departments with what I thought were the larger, more significant variances. So the county executive increased by 11. The fiscal office went up by 7. The Department of Health and Human Services went up by 140. Information technology by 4. Public safety by 10. Public works by 19. The sheriff went up 85 staff. Juvenile court went up by 6. The Board of Developmental Disabilities went up by 17. And Board of Elections went up by 10.
So, Director, I don't want your communications people to be screaming at you after this meeting is over. So I'm just going to mention that I know that a significant part of the change for the county executive was that they moved some communication staff from various departments into the county executive's office, but that part of it did not reflect an actual staffing increase, and so only part of that 4 to 15 number was actually any addition of personnel.
That's correct. Councilman Miller, I believe that's the IT media group,
Exactly.
web media group. 4, maybe 5 staff were transferred up to the county executive's office under the communications division.
Questions or comments?
I do have some detail, if you'd like, about the Department of Health and Human Services increase, and also the sheriff. If you'd like, I could go over some of those.
Please do so.
So for the Department of Health and Human Services, I saw the major increases were in 3 divisions. Children and Family Services went up by 58 staff, so that's 21 social workers, 10 supervisors, 4 program officers, 5 family service aides, 4 social program administrators, 3 account clerks. Job and Family Services, primarily 30 customer service aides, 2 caseworkers, 7 supervisors, 8 administrative assistants. And then senior and adult services went up by 8, 3 assessment specialists, 2 social workers, and 3 supervisors. The sheriff went up 85, 47 corrections officers, but 17 deputies. It doesn't make up the entire 85, but those were the significant increases.
It was corrections officers and
And
what?
deputies, 17 deputies.
Councilman Schron.
So our number change has gone up, what did you say, 300?
312, yes.
320? I know that Mr. Miller and Mr. Gallagher and I were all here at the very beginning of this, and it was anticipated that we were going to become a more efficient governmental body, and certainly after we spent $35 million on the ERP system that was supposed to build operational efficiencies into what we do as a government for our taxpayers. Could you do a trend from the time of the new county government to where we are right now, so we could get a head count and on a flow chart, so it would be very easy for us to see where we're trending to? I get the sense that we are not trending to a lower number. We're trending to a significantly higher number than what we were when this body was founded. And certainly the ERP has not resulted, I don't think, in a lower number of employees due to efficiency and effectiveness. Thank you. Unless you have that number, those,
I'm sorry.
yeah, that beginning number. Okay, thank you.
I mean, I have numbers just going back to 2018 with me.
Yeah. My assumption will be shocked as to where that trend has gone to. Thank you.
I actually think we're a little bit below our starting number, which I think was in the high 7s to 8,000 range. There was a pretty good sized drop in the first year of operations.
Right. The first county executive dropped it, I believe.
Right. So I think we're a little bit below that number, but not by a huge amount.
Okay.
But I would like to see the actual numbers. Maybe my memory's not on target.
Mine's getting a little gray too. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? So I have a general comment, and I would invite the director's comment on it if he chooses, which is that we spent the vast majority of this afternoon talking about operations, which is to be expected because this is the results of operations report. But my primary concern for the county's finances going forward is not about operations, but rather is about capital. And the things that we have on the horizon, it includes the jail, the Justice Center, the waterfront, the Browns, the Cavaliers and the Guardians, major repairs, and there's probably several more that I'm not immediately thinking about, and so my belief is that we should start looking at these capital needs in a comprehensive manner and planning for them strategically over the long term, rather than doing what we've been doing in the past, which is taking them one at a time when a decision on one particular item becomes urgent. So that's my primary concern going forward.
I would agree with everything you said, Councilman Miller.
Councilman Schron.
Okay, our council, committee chairman said it, and you agreed with it, and I've heard it now coming from, occasionally from the county executive. Is there a financial commitment of a capital nature that this body is discussing in regards to the Cleveland Browns? Unless I'm missing something, I wasn't aware that we have a capital budget obligation.
Councilman Strawn, I'm not aware of one, but I haven't heard a request or,
Okay, well, the county executive has talked, I've heard the conversation starting to float into words like the Browns, and the committee chairman just said, listed the Browns specifically, and then you agreed with everything said. So I'm just trying to find out, is there something pending, or that this body should know to prioritize whether or not we want to send
Councilman
funds?
Strawn, I just want to be clear, I agreed with Councilman Miller's holistic approach to this.
Okay, all right. That we should be looking capital, and I agree 100% that we should be looking at our capital expenditures I agree 100%. I just I guess I'm not prepared to agree that the Browns make that list. They might, but who knows at this point in time. I didn't even know there was a list with them on it, so thank you.
So, there is something that I think I can safely say about this situation based on my knowledge, and I believe it's accurate, which is that the city of Cleveland and the Browns are currently in negotiations. And that because the city of Cleveland owns the facility, they're taking the lead on the process. And at some point in the future, if the city of Cleveland and the Browns come to a tentative agreement, I would not be surprised if they come to both the state and the county asking for each to contribute part of the public funding that's requested. And if and when that happens, the extent to which the county should participate and the question of the extent to which we're obligated to do so will be a matter of considerable discussion. So that's where I think it stands.
I agree that if that should come to fruition, that we would clearly want to be involved with the discussion as opposed to catching it after the fact and say that we have a different body has said that we think that the county should step up and put X in. If we've not participated, sometimes that happens with the city. The conversations take place and they were an afterthought. And so I agree that capital expenditures should be way out in front for anything, whether, you know, it's the jail complex, it's this, and I agree 100% that capital expenditures should be looking at 3 years, 5 years down the road or more.
I have some concerns about whether the process that seems to be underway is workable, and whether all the parties need to be involved simultaneously. But that's above my pay grade. Councilman Gallagher.
I believe the governor's already stated that Cincinnati and Cleveland will be getting money for stadium improvements, if not new stadiums. And quite honestly, I mean, this is a Cleveland issue. I think it needs to remain a Cleveland issue. We've helped them out. Correct me if I'm wrong. Haven't we peeled off some of the syntax for the Brown Stadium that Cleveland uses for their upkeep?
Yes,
Yes.
Councilman Gallagher, you're correct.
Right, which
Yes.
we didn't have to do, which to the end of when this sunsets, which I believe is in 28, I think it's 28, is about $50 million. So whether they build it in Cleveland or whether they build it in Brook Park or wherever they go, as long as it's in Cuyahoga County, that money should follow the Browns. So that should be, as far as I'm concerned, that's enough of our input as far as stadium money, and the rest is on them.
I believe they're collecting roughly a third of the syntax money just for the,
Right, which was a benefit to Cleveland. out of the goodness of our hearts, which somehow is never reciprocated from Cleveland to the county. So just to be clear. So I think there's money on the table. I know the NFL has money on the table. I know we have put money into Cleveland's coffers to help them out. And I think it'll be interesting if they go to Brook Park, how much kick and screaming we'll hear from Cleveland about that 50 extra billion or million that should follow the Browns to wherever they go, because it is in the county. So, but as Mr. Schrein says, it's interesting that we're not part of the major discussions yet, but in the back end, we will be. So just let's not forget, we've already kicked in.
And to follow on my colleague, it's my concern as to why, when we get done with the whole complex as far as the project, that $4 billion expenditure, as I think you'll acknowledge, we're going to be throwing off between sales tax increase and lower inflationary expense, probably could be anywhere from $700 million to over $1 billion, which is unspoken for funds, not for that jail justice center complexes out there. And that's what concerns me as to how we presented that to the taxpayers as a broken record on that issue.
So, Director, I have one more somewhat related request. In your response to one of the advanced questions, you said that we have programmed 30-some million in capital expenditures for this year and 50-some for next year. Could you just provide me a list of items and amounts
Oh, absolutely.
and provide that to the committee? Any other comments or questions? So, Director, thank you very much for an excellent report and well presented, and it gives us a good snapshot of where we are, and I look forward sometime in early May or so to looking at the results from the first quarter, and then we'll see what the actuals for 2024 look like. Okay. Councilman Sean.
I want to reiterate my chairman's comments. Well done. Well done. And I appreciate the conciseness, the directness, and you do not tap dance about tough questions. So I appreciate your willingness
in
to.
my nature, I just.
Well, it's a crazy thing. You know, this honesty thing is something that I think is a good thing for all of us to practice. And you come forth with presenting it. If it's a tough question, you don't shy away from answering it, whatever takes place. So congratulations to you and what you do when you step up to that microphone. Thank you.
Any miscellaneous business? Hearing none, we are